Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Subcommittee of Appropriations. We're going to open, if you would, with a prayer. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's bow our heads. Gracious Heavenly Father, again, thank you for another day. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to serve the people of the state of Georgia. Please bless us all with wisdom and moderation. Please bless the Smith family as they go through their losing their loved one. Also, Representative Mickey Stevens, him and his family. Please bless us all, lead us, guide us, and direct us. Please bless our men and women in uniform, the ones in harm's way. Watch over them all. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to get started. Commissioner McMurray, if you would like to come forward and go over your budget.
Well, good morning to everybody on another beautiful rainy morning, but it's above freezing, so we count our blessings. In the transportation world, that's important. That's right. I believe Abby has spread a handout to use to look at the governor's FY21 budget recommendation, and we'll jump right into that. On our first slide, or next slide there, you can see what becomes our base, starting with the FY20 original estimate at $1.865 billion, with interest earnings on motor fuel at $60 million, totaling $1.25 million as our base. The recommended adjustments from the governor's office was $60.6 million increase in excise, a $9 million reduction in interest earnings, which is about a 15% reduction, which actually just sort of trues up to the actual numbers that interest were being earned on, which gives an add of $51.6 million over the base, bringing our excise revenue to $1.977 billion. And this represents about a 3.5% increase over what amended 20 was going to be. So you did see a little increase there. On the next page is a pie chart that represents the transportation fees and state general funds in FY21 that are used for transportation purposes. And so if you look at these numbers, you can see the biggest part of the pie comes from the hotel motel fee at $179 million. The next slice of the pie that's the biggest is state general funds at 16.43, and the majority of that goes to airport aid, and I'll show you that number later in the presentation. And then the last one is highway impact fees at $15.6 million, which is comprised of three components. One is the EV fee, and the other two are the heavy impact fees based on vehicles over 15,000 up to 26,000 pounds. And the lion's share of the $15.6 million actually comes from the heavy vehicle impact fee. About 25% of that is the alternative fuel fee for EVs. So that gives us a base of excise, and then here's state general funds and transportation fees. And on the next slide, basically shows you how those fees are being used. At $211.439 million was the total of that pie chart. We have two breakdowns or two line items basically that reduce that amount to other agencies. Under the Department of Community Affairs, Greta, in the ATL, about $330,000 to Greta, and then $18.3 million to the ATL. Also in Department of Public Safety, $15.8 million to the Motor Carrier Compliance Division, leaving a balance of $176.8 million to the department for utilization in our programs. As comparison, the amended 20 budget, that number was about $196 million in fees utilized by the department. So that gives us our base of the excise and transportation fees. And if you turn over to the next slide, you will see a bar chart that you've seen before. And we always like to show you this graphically because it really shows you where the dollars are being invested. And if you look in the top right of that bar chart, you'll see motor fuel, transportation fees / state general funds totaling $2.154 billion. And if you've got your track sheet on page 95 or page 117 of the budget, you will see our total dollars there being $2.043 billion. So you see there's a little discrepancy, and let me explain why that is. The discrepancy is that far right column of $110.5 million to GO bond debt, or general obligation debt rather. That is not reflected in our budget. That comes right off the top of excise to go to do bond to pay the GO debt service. So if you happen to take what's on your track sheet of $2.043 billion, add the 110.5, you get what we're showing on this bar chart. But this bar chart is a good way to show that where all the funds are being used from excise and transportation fees. So let me start with the column on the left, the capital projects that's sort of circled in the green. Capital projects constitute 49% of our overall state budget at $1.06 billion. And if you flip over to the next sheet, you can see that those are actually 3 budget programs that you have on your track sheet or on the actual budget itself. And so this is showing where $43.7 million are being added to the budget. The lion's share of that's 36.9 being added to the capital construction program, and the capital construction program is where we buy property and build projects, the capital type projects. 6.8 is going to capital maintenance, and that's exactly what that is. That's resurfacing, bridge rehabilitation, things like that is where our capital maintenance program is. Local roads admin is actually where we administer federal funds to local governments, and so this is a small amount of money that we have to cover until federal reimbursements start coming back in. So there's no change to that, but you can see that what that constitutes in capital projects. On the next slide is circled general operations rather at 10.5%, $226 million. And I like to talk about what those consist of too. So this is 5 budget programs on your track sheet or in the budget. And if you flip to the next table, you can see the 21 general operations. And there are these 5 budget programs. Construction administration, that's the programs that have the people that deliver the projects. So this is the people and the programs it takes to get to a capital project, to be either a capital construction project, a capital maintenance project, or a local roads admin project. So that's the big bulk of the work there to get projects ready to be constructed. Data collections is a group of folks that do federal reporting. There's a lot of statistics, highway statistics that have to be reported federally. They're also the people that do county maps. We still make 159 county maps. And do the state map as well. The other next budget program with no change is departmental admin, and that's exactly what it is. That's the administration of the department. And then the planning division falls in here as well at $2.47 million. That's the planning staff. And then lastly is traffic management at $50.06 million. Traffic management budget are the people in the programs of what it sounds like, traffic management, to maintain traffic signals, to maintain the cameras, the signs, also our CHAMP program, also our HERO programs, all those things on the operational side in traffic management falls into there as well. So those are the general operations programs, no change in the recommendation there for any of those programs. If you flip over to the next sheet, the next 2 bars to talk about are LMIG at 10%, and that represents about a $5.16 million add to $197.7 million to our local governments, cities and counties, again on a formula distribution basis. The next column next to it is routine maintenance. The routine maintenance is the men and women out taking care of our roadways for the department. This is obviously it seems like barring this last weekend, These are the people working all weekends, either trying to keep the snow off the roads, the black ice off the roads, or not putting out tanker fires, but having to go in and repave interstates over the weekends when tractor trailers catch on fire and burn up the interstate. So hats off to the great job they've done. Interestingly to note, out of the routine maintenance budget, about half of that is actually outsourced to contractors to do to do routine maintenance, to do the invitation to bid kind of projects I've shared with this committee before with. So that's what that is. No change in FY21 for them. The next category on the bar chart, it's got a green circle around it, is in the payments to CERTA at $94.4 million. And if you flip over the next page, we'll show you sort of what the breakdown is in payments to CERTA. We have some good news here is our debt service is beginning to be reduced. So we have guaranteed revenue bond debt service reduced by $1,750. We have Garvey debt service being reduced by $12.7 million. Garvey are federal bonds that are used. And then you can see under the next column, new Garvey debt. And that's where we've actually sold Garvey bonds to do advanced purchase of right-of-way around 285 and Upstate Route 400 for some of our express lane projects. So that one's actually a $1.4 million add. Also in the payments to CERTA is $12.99 million to continue the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank. And next you have operations. It's $10 million, and that's year 4 of the what we've called the 10 for 10 to pay for operations of the Northwest Corridor, 75 South, the Express Lane, and the 85 Extension. And then lastly, we have an I-75 debt prepayment plan. We have an agreement with CERTA to pay down one of their toll revenue bonds on the 75 South Express Lanes to pay it down early. So the $2.5 million goes to start pre-funding and be ready to make the first payment in FY24 to try to pay down the bond sooner than later to ultimately save the state dollars in interest earnings. So overall to CERTA, in payments to CERTA, we took a $8.8 million reduction, bringing the payment to CERTA total to be $94.4 million. If you flip to the next slide is intermodal at $20.3 million, which constitutes about 1% of the overall budget. And on the next slide, if you turn very quickly, we'll get to a breakdown of intermodal, because I know this is always you'd like to see the 4 programs there. So I talked about earlier, the biggest part of the state general funds go to aviation at $14.6 million. To support the Georgia Ports Authority, we have $1.2 million for that program. The biggest part of that actually pays property tax for our property in South Carolina. And I would say I'm proud of our team. They've worked to reduce our tax burden in South Carolina by working with the tax assessor's office over there. I think we told them they couldn't come back into Georgia unless they worked with us. Anyway. Also for our rail program, right at $735,000 for that. And then at transit, $3.24 million for our transit program, which is basically for us administering the Federal Transit Administration grants to local governments that provide transit service. You'll see an add of $500,000. That was added in the governor's recommendation for basically transfer to DNR for their ferry service at Sapelo Island. So you see a $500,000 add to intermodal over the base that brings you to $20.36 million. Now, these dollars between airport aid, ports and waterways, and really transit leverage about $92 million, almost $93 million of federal dollars. So if you take the 20.3 and you take the federal, then you're talking about a total about $113.5 million. So the state dollars, the fees really go to leverage federal dollars in a big kind of way. Next slide is just a summary of all the changes. And so if you look at the top part of that slide in blue, that's the motor fuel, the excise piece, and you can see where the recommended adds are. We've already hashed through that. And on the bottom, you can see where the state general funds or the transportation fees are. And again, the biggest part of that are reductions due to lower debt service, which is always a good thing. And I might add, as we've contemplated and built into our metrics of lower debt service, those dollars that are freed up are going to do the bigger capital projects. We're trying to roll those dollars back in to do big projects, especially part of our MMIP. That is actually baked into our debt savings are baked into that. On the next slide, if you turn over to page 101 on your track sheet, I believe you'll see all the state bonds. For Department of Transportation, we're at 50.2.3.71, or basically bond number 71. Make sure I told you guys, right? Is that on the track sheet or?
No, we
Okay.
don't have that. We didn't do
I'm
bonds.
sorry.
That's all.
Trust me. It says $50 million for bridges, and we, I said $50 million for bridges. Yeah, checks in the mail, all those things. Thanks, Jeff. So anyway, that's where it shows $50 million for bridges. That will do 12 to 15 state bridges, and as I shared with this committee before, whatever we take in state bonds, we free those dollars up that we would normally work on our bridges and put on the local system, on county bridges or city bridges. So it's a great example of how these bonds really help us advance other bridges. And then lastly, I'll just close out on the last slide again, coming back to the tremendous men and women of GDOT that are out there working hard every day. You can see that we've delivered over $1 billion since 2015 each year, more work with fewer people than we've ever had, or about the same we did back then. And again, our HR staff does a tremendous job. Our turnover rate's about 16%. Last year, we had 628 people leave service of the department, of which had to be backfilled. Just think about 628 HR transactions to hire people, get them back in the door, not to mention the institutional knowledge that walks out the door when people retire or leave. So they do a really good job, and I can't, again, say enough about the dedication and hard work of our employees, like I've talked about except for this past weekend. I know there was some call-outs, but we had people working last Thursday night into Friday morning through the threat of black ice across northern metro all the way up to the Tennessee border and across the state line from Alabama to South Carolina. So they worked all night and came in the morning, went home to rest, came back, worked all night to make sure the roads were clear, and the weatherman got it wrong, and we're very happy when he gets it wrong when it's warmer than it's supposed to be. But previous weekend, they worked on snow, the removal all weekend long, and previous weekend of that, like I said, they repaved Interstate 85 after a tanker fire. So the dedication of the men and women of GDOT are unparalleled and unmatched, and I'd put them up against anybody. So I'll just close on that, Madam Chair, and be glad to entertain any questions or comments.
Thank you. You do have a couple questions. Representative LaRicchia?
Mr. Chairman, I know that since we've had more of these regions that are TIA regions, one of which is down in southeast Georgia where I'm at, and we've talked to our board members in that area and just wanted to remind everyone and ask a question, making sure that somehow these regions that have passed their own SPLOST are not somehow, I don't want to use the word penalized, but if you would comment on that. And the second question is on the statewide planning director. Do we have that person yet? Because as you start working through the TIA and working with regular funding from GDOT, our board members and that planning director is essential to help and wade through all of that. So first question was just kind of reminding everybody you're not penalized because you are in these TIA regions, and secondly, how important that planning director is, and where are we at on the planning director?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I can say unequivocally the 3 original TIA regions that passed have all benefited for not being penalized. In fact, in the law is in that original TIA law was that you could not remove projects because of that you have more money there. In fact, we've leveraged more money, and it's always easier when a local government can bring money to the table. It makes us to put money with it to do more. So it's always a lifting effect, and we always remember those that help themselves first. And I think you know some good examples of that, and I can tell you in all three regions, I think all your local governments could attest to that. As it relates to the planning director, obviously the governor's made that appointment as Janine Miller, a lady I know very well and worked well for a very long time. Look forward to having her on board. She is still awaiting confirmation from the House and Senate Transportation Committees to be on board at GDOT. But I can tell you that we've already gone through the next round of projects in the Central Savannah River area region. And I actually sat in with our board members at the table with the citizens or the executive committee that is where all the county chairmen or mayors come together and vet through the list. And we made those decisions in the absence of a planning director, sat there with our planning staff, with our board members, with the cities and counties, and decided how much more money we could bring to that region and had negotiated and worked through that. So Central Savannah River area is a great example of that. We've got that list. I think if you talk to any of the county commission chairs or the mayors there, I think they would say that was a good exercise. We anticipate doing that. Hopefully the planning director's on board, but Heart of Georgia is doing the same thing now to try to have try to get the referendum on the ballot sometime this year, looking probably more like the presidential election. Central Savannah actually will be in March, so they're already up and running. So in the absence of that, we'll continue to work together, get all the input from our cities and counties, and then figure out how GDOT can leverage our dollars with their dollars to do more than we ever could alone.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, yes. If you would.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I missed the reduction to CERTA was the $11.5 million was due to what?
The biggest part of that's our debt reduction, and CERTA as our partner actually holds our federal debt, and because we can as an agency, so they hold that. So that's where our debt curve's sort of fallen off, which is good.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. The governor's raise of $1,000, is that included in your budget anywhere? Is it there?
It's not explicitly shown anywhere as some of the other agencies, said $1,000. Those operations, under that operations category and under routine maintenance is where all our people are generally. The most of the people, there are obviously some people in intermodal, but the biggest bulk of our people are in general operations in those those 5 budget programs and routine maintenance. So what we'll have to do for the $1,000 for under 40,000, basically will just come off the top, which will reduce the other things we do in those programs. So to make that whole.
Okay, it's in there, but it would have to be moving per se. It's not a line item.
It wasn't called out specifically as a line item, or there was any add to those budget programs either. So basically, we just have to try to absorb that in that, which means that there will be other or less things we do in those categories to try to satisfy that.
Okay, and do we have any idea how many employees or what the total cost would have been? Do we?
The $1,000 for 40,000 is 1,800 and. Remember the exact number, it's like 1860. So, and again, we're right at 3,950 employees or so.
Okay.
So it's a big percentage of that. And the biggest number of those are in the routine maintenance category, the men and women out there working on the roadways, and then in the capital construction budget. It's where the bulk of our people are. Those are the people that get the projects ready to be bid.
Okay, and I noticed on 47.1.2.1, replacing the state general funds with the motor fuel. Do we know why, and or where will these state general funds be redirected? Do we know anything about that? 47.1.
Okay. Yeah, so we have traditionally used our transportation fees to help pay down the bond debt or pay our debt down. And so back to that pie chart in the next chart where transportation fees are being used elsewhere, we had to backfill that with motor fuel. So we took basically transportation fees and put motor fuel or excise revenue to replace it. So it's really a fund source swap that since there was less transportation fees, excise went back to pay that debt back.
And I have one other question, which I don't know that we have the answer, but when we had met before, the revenue was down based on the number of gallons sold and miles traveled. Have we come to any conclusion of what that's about or how it?
Not yet. Angela and her teams actually reached out to Department of Revenue, and we're having some conversations with them. We're looking at the makeup of the fleet and trying to really understand if the fleet change has had impact on efficiency, and looking at still watching those consumption numbers. But especially as we get into spring, we really will see I think we'll really see an indicator of how consumption will be compared to previous years. Will be a good indicator, certainly a good indicator.
Thank you. We have another question. Representative Hitchens?
I don't have a question. I've got I just want to make a comment. As I sit here looking through the crowd, I see Josh sitting back there, and sometimes I think he goes unappreciated. And 2 weeks ago, unexpectedly, I got a call from the Savannah Morning News, and every Saturday, one of us in the 8-member delegation has to write an op-ed, or doesn't have to, but we do write one, about anything that we choose to, and it goes out on Saturday. And one of our delegation members is out, so I called it a week before I was prepared, and I hadn't done much, and I called Josh to get a lot of statistical information. And by very nature of where I'm located, the ports are in my district, I-95, Savannah, I-16, and Josh got me the information in about 12 hours. And between that and the port, I was able to put out a pretty good article about what's going on with the ports, the deepening, the harbor deepening, probably the new bridge or tunnel, widening of I-16, the new interchange at I-16, I-95, the old River Road project, and it's of significant importance in the area because traffic congestion, as you know, is pretty horrific at times. The growth not only at the port but in population, and I just wanted to acknowledge Josh for being on the ball and not just sitting in the back unnoticed all the time. So, thank you.
Thank you for that recognition. Well deserved.
Madam Chair, now we know where all the project money's going.
That's what I was thinking as he was rolling them off.
I appreciate you helping us a little bit too.
Thank you. And I will do some praise for your folks, too. I remember quite well how Department of Transportation helped during Hurricane Michael. They were the first ones there clearing roads and really was beneficial. Thank you very much. Good group of folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions.
All right. Thank you very much.
Next up. I know we've got some new faces, and if you make some introductions.
Good morning. I'm Heather Aquino, the Deputy Executive Director for CERTA, Greta, and the ATL. And this is Monique Simmons, our CFO. Chris Tomlinson, our Executive Director, is in D.C. today for a presentation and meeting himself, so he's sorry he couldn't be here with us. We will just walk through the budget changes. We'll start with CERTA, and then I'll move on to Greta and the ATL. So on the first slide, this is the governor's recommendation for the FY 2021 budget. Some of this the commissioner just walked through. The first item is just to reduce the state general funds to reflect that reduction in debt service. It's roughly $8.8 million. The next item is replacing $2.6 million in state general funds with motor fuel funds. And then the last item is just a recognition of year 4 of 10 with the $10 million for operations of I-75 South, the Northwest Corridor, and the I-85 extension. On the next slide, there's a pie chart that shows where those state dollars within the CERTA budget go. And you'll see the $12.9 million for GTIB, our Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank program, The largest amount of funding goes to pay down debt service. That's roughly 71.4 million. And then the 10 for 10.
I'm sorry,
That's okay.
we didn't have all the
Sorry.
copies.
And you'll notice related to the debt service that the remaining principal that we're expecting as of June 30th, 2021 will be down just under $47 million. On the next slide, we'll move to the Greta budget. So there are really three things happening within Greta's budget. The first is an increase for Express operations. Express is our regional commuter bus service, and that increase is $3.4 million. And then the next item is a transfer of this Express service to the ATL. And this is a result of House Bill 930 that was passed in the 2018 legislative session, and that transfer is $15.8 million. And then the last item is simply just a recognition that the $330,000 remaining in Greta's budget are to be used for the Transportation Improvement Plan and development of regional impact initiatives. And so our last slide's going to be the other side of that transfer that I just mentioned. So for the ATL, you'll see that that $15.8 million is coming from the Greta budget, and it's being placed into ATL's budget for Express operations. The money for the ATL, just operations, remains flat. So you're really just seeing that increase as a result of the transfer. And then the last item is just a directive to us to examine our Express fare recovery ratios over the next year. And that is the budget for the three authorities.
You have, okay, Mr. Lurkia.
Good morning. Thank you for that. Be sure and tell the director you did an unbelievable job. We appreciate it. But the question that I have, and I think about this as I use the express lanes on 75 South going home to South Georgia, we try to get out of here as quick as we can. Where are we in regards to some of the return on that with ones who buy the pass or maybe fines or whatever? Is there some sort of a report that lets us know what kind of income we're generating on those express lanes, or is that what you're going to be looking at?
So when you're asking about the return for that express lane, are you wanting to see the financials basically for all of them, or are you focused just
Yeah,
on some
all of
the
them's
top
fine.
pieces?
I'm just wondering, because the idea, I think, is, or the way that I think about it, is not just trying to increase people's ability to move and come in and out of Atlanta, but how much money are we generating on those passes, or how often they're using them, or whatever it is, to see.
So the actual Peach Pass, we don't charge for the Peach Pass, but we do load $20 on it, and then it can be reloaded. Or you can get a pass that you get it like a CVS that just is a prepaid. But I would say around $30 million is what we brought in FY 2019, and that's over all the roadways. We can get you more detailed information. But related to 75 South, our focus right now is really paying off that debt early, as the commissioner mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
I do think it would be interesting to see if we can break it down by how much I don't see it used as much as the one in the north, and I'd like to see the difference in and where the money's coming from and how much, and at what point do we think it'll be able to recover and pay for itself? If we have any predictors like that, if you can get that, would be wonderful.
Absolutely, we'll get some information to Abby.
Thank you. Let's see. What's the current fare box recovery? Is that even known?
It's a little under,
It's around 26%.
Okay.
and we're also making some improvements to our fleet related to new fare boxes, so we're also expecting that to help with the recovery ratio.
Okay, that's great. Representative Hitchens?
I just had a question that goes back to the one before last with the gentleman from Douglas down there. I was wondering if you keep statistics on how many people go through and aren't Peach Pass members and have to pay the fines, and how many of them may be in the General Assembly on this committee.
I pay.
You will, and we do. But if you pay within 30 days, we can reduce it to 5. So we do like people to know that. Our violation rate, I think, is relatively low. And as far as total annual trips for the I-85 Express Lane in FY 2019, it was a little under 10 million. The I-85 extension, which wasn't open for very long, is roughly 1.6 million. Northwest Corridor was 5.8 million trips, and then 75 South was a little over 3 million.
Well, I just use it routinely, and I see cars with vehicle plates on it that aren't members of the compact. They're not from Florida, North Carolina, or Georgia, and they just seem to think it's a great opportunity to expedite their process. And
we certainly appreciate their money.
well, I
for
just
riding
wondered
that
how
lane.
difficult it was to get that money. I guess it's reciprocal with the states like it is with traffic fines. And
So for our out-of-state violators, we actually have an agreement with an entity that will pay us the tolls up front, and then they go to try to collect on our
Okay.
behalf. So we
Thank
make
you.
sure that we're at least collecting those tolls.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. We appreciate your spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? We will be getting together and having a final vote and tally, and we will let you know. Thank you. We are adjourned.